they will think I'm stupid. So I'm not going to do that. So let's start with the foundational stuff. First and foremost, the process that we follow is essentially we have, at this point, we have like 20 to 40,000 exports on Reonomy that we take. Okay, and we'll take the beginning of the month, we'll export every single lead list that we want to pull for this month. Everyone's got like the hottest buyers. So like if we know like, hey, we have a buyer who's specifically looking for X metro, X type of unit number, unit count, tax bracket, location, we'll pull a list for that specific buyer. We like to prospect for someone, right? We don't want to just dial to dial. So we found that most success in just dialing specifically for X buyer. So each one of our agents has a specific buyer or 2 or 3 that they're prospecting for. We pull 1 or 2 lists for them. They prospect that list, so on and so forth. The process here is that we do export now, again, even if there's 15 numbers on a Reonomy number, we prospect all of them. All those numbers we'll add up and we'll put it into Reonomy. We'll import that into our dialer. We use Mojo. And same thing, doesn't matter what dialer you use. But we'll call all of them. And now we count that towards dials, but we don't count that, or calls, right? But we don't count that towards, conversations. The conversations, you're only, one of those numbers is only going to get the person, right? You maybe 2. You have an office line and a house, right? Or a house and a mobile, right? So the calls, I always tell people, is like, people get too caught up in how many calls they make. I don't give a shit how many calls you make. You can make 60 calls a day, but if they're all sphere of influence, you'll have 40 conversations and have a very good career, right? So the calls is an irrelevant number. What I more so track when you're cold calling is I care about how many leads are you generating, how many conversations with the specific owner are you having. Those are more tangible data points where we can go off of, because some days you're going to call 400 numbers to get 20 contacts and some you're going to call 60. You sort of over time will get a rough average of what that number is. And more often than not, our agents on average are making between 6,000 and 12,000 calls a month on average right now, which basically puts you at, call it 20 working days a month, somewhere between 300 and 600 dials a day. That's just a rough average for what we're seeing on an agent count basis. So
that leads me to another question. How do I get to that many dials if I only get 1,000 exports?
We pay an excessive amount extra to get more exports. Reonomy actually allows you to max out at 5,000 per account. You pay whatever your base amount is that you got, which again with a discount is $320, plus an extra $100 per month extra for additional exports. Right, for per 1,000. Sorry, it's an extra $100 per 1,000. So if you want 4,000, which is an extra 4,000 exports, it's $400 extra a month. Now, yeah, so we have several maxed out accounts, and that being said, that allows us to then kind of rip through all those numbers. Now we've been doing this for years, which is how we have a backlog of hundreds of thousands of numbers in multiple different metros and statewide in New Jersey and so on and so forth. But then sometimes we'll even use batch leads or a software called IDI to skip trace those numbers. Now again, you end up paying an extra 15 cents or $1 per lead depending on what you're looking for contact wise if you skip trace numbers that don't exist, right? Like sometimes Reonomy has some addresses where they don't have a phone number. You can look them up through different skip tracing softwares. But the long story short is that we'll export, call it your 1,000. And keep in mind that even with 1,000 numbers, which by the way, through me, they should be giving you 2,000 exports for your first month. They should give you 2,000 exports. Okay. And then it goes to 1,000, everything else. You'll take your, call it 1,000, 1,000 exports. And with that 1,000 exports, let's just say that roughly 30% of those are correct numbers, right? You're not always going to sadly, that's just what it is, right? So 30% of them are correct numbers, which means 300 numbers are accurate, or 300 contact, phone numbers there are accurate to the owner. The first time you run through 1,000 numbers, you're not going to speak to 300 people. You're just not going to do that, right? You're probably going to maybe speak to 50, and even 50 is not bad. And then what'll happen is that what we try to do is that we clean our lists as we prospect through it. So you'll call it once, remove the 50 correct numbers that you spoke to and put it into your database. And then you're going to take let's just say you had 100 conversations total for 1,000, 10% contact ratio. You remove 50 that were bad numbers. Now you're down, right? Now you're down to 950, and then you remove another 50 of correct numbers. So now you're down to a 900 person list of people you've never spoken to. Now you can call that list the same tomorrow. You can call another 900 people tomorrow. Let's just say now you spoke to 50 total people on the 900. 25 wrong numbers, 25 correct numbers. You're just cleaning the list as you dial it down. You can continue to dial it over and over again. That, at least for foundational processes, that's the upfront piece. And then I would, in the dashboard, I, give you areas to track numbers. Obviously you've trained hundreds of agents like myself. You can track your own data. I know you've probably done that 100 times. I'll even give you, so this Wednesday, I have not shared this with anybody. So you're going to be the first person to see this.
Well, I will tell you this, I'm going to use everything that you do because it seems to be drastically different than what we do on the residential side. So, and like I always tell all the people that I train, don't change my shit. It's going to work a lot better, right? So I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to do like, okay, this is your thing. I'm going to put it in your thing. Like that's how I do.
Well, look, I'm going to give you this doc, which I just created. I just custom built this myself. I'm a spreadsheet nerd.
Ari,
Yeah, so I'll share my screen while we do this together. I'm gonna go through this. This is the business workshop session that we're gonna go through this Wednesday. So, anyways, you see this here real quick. You'll basically import all your data on a regular basis on the second page here: commissions, calls, conversations, new leads, lead lists. I mean, this is how I have it broken down for every agent. But on this page here, as an example, right? So, if you want to just break down sort of my estimates of what you should be doing on a regular basis, you can plug in whatever your numbers are, right? Like you're at 80/20 with EXP. Your average deal size in your area is probably maybe what, $1 to $2 million, $1.5 million.
yeah, something like that.
Let's just say you can double end most of your deals, say 5 points. What's your monthly personal bills?
Like actual living expenses. I mean, geez, like $12,000.
All right, great. We'll do 12 grand. And let's just say you want to make how much next year, like cash in the bank after taxes?
An extra 250 would be a pretty successful start, I think.
No, it's great. Yeah, I'm with you. So let's just say 250. So you need to make 738 grand next year before taxes. This is your total GCI. This will take into consideration everything else. So this is basically saying that you need to close on 15 transactions next year for roughly 15 million in production, 5% average commission per deal, roughly 12,000 calls a month. Again, like this is just all estimates, and then once you track it, you'll start plugging it all in, and then you can change the conversion numbers. Okay, so I just have it at 10% for conversations, 10% for leads, 10% for true offers, and execute it every 10. So this will give you an idea of what you need to be breaking down here. And obviously, this will be kind of impossible, but you get my point. But the point I'm going to break here is about the LOIs is the next thing I want to track. So anyways, I'm going to have everyone kind of plug in their numbers on Wednesday. I'll go more into it, but I wanted to make sure you had a copy of it. Let's dive into LOIs because I know that's a very heated question I get literally almost every day. I want you to think about it like this. I run my company like an investment shop. We are looking to acquire properties. That is our forte. We run it like an investment shop, a wholesale shop. Like we are looking to acquire assets. We're looking to flip properties. That is our bread and butter. Now, I want to understand something. We don't list anything. Nothing I do, like we're not calling up a seller to try to list a property for sale unless it is literally the only viable option to possibly get this property sold. Which even then, I'll give to my agents. Take the listing. I don't care, right? Like I don't want to be bogged down. The only thing it's good for is buyer leads, essentially, right? That's all in my eyes a horribly priced listing is good for. Because if it's appropriately priced, in my eyes, I don't see the point of listing it for sale. Because like the way I want you to think about it is like if you had a residential list, like in residential, it's get the listing. Like that is the process. That is the game of residential business. In commercial, that is not the game. That is not how this game works. It's been taught that way for a long time, but that's not how the game essentially works. The vast majority of real estate deals are done off market, right? They're never seen. The best deals in the marketplace are not ever listed for sale. Because why on planet Earth would you list a property for sale when you have 40 buyers right here that would buy this property? Right? You just never would. You'd represent both sides and call it a day. Same thing as if you were a principal, you would never just list the property for sale unless it's like you're trying to ask for some crazy, ridiculous top dollar and you're working with like the top 2% of brokers in the country for that specific asset class. Typically, because like if you think about it, what the largest companies in the world do, they just go, hey, Blackstone, I'm interested in selling my 5,000 unit portfolio. What would your best offer be? And that's it. It's not like they go, I'm going to list my $10 billion portfolio. No, they call up Blackstone. They call up, a couple of these huge organizations and they get an offer, right? That's it. What I'm saying is my philosophy and the reason why we drive LOIs as hard as we do is because, look, and by the way, I've written up letters of intent of over $100 million. I cannot close on a $100 million deal. I will have to raise an excessive amount of money, okay? But the process is still the same. And the reason why it's still the same is because I still need to, I like to bring my clientele, my buyers who are very financially savvy, who know what the fuck they're doing, who I don't need to babysit. I want to bring them a deal on a silver platter and say, hey, I've already negotiated this deal for you. The seller is going to tell you, think about it. The first number a seller tells you is going to be a knee-jerk reaction, stupid fuck number. They're going to tell you some random number because they don't know who you are. They don't trust you. You're randomly cold calling them out of the blue. So when they say, hey, I want $3 million for a property that's maybe worth 2, right? Maybe. I will submit an offer at 1.5 to test the waters. Is this guy seriously stuck at 3? Or what's the situation? Because what I don't want to do is then bring this deal at $3 million to my investors at a 4 cap. They will think I'm stupid. So I'm not going to do that. So what I have found is that like I know what they're going to say to me. I've been doing this long enough where like I already know what the investors are going to think. They're going to think a 4 cap is absolutely stupid. No one's paying a 4 cap right now. Unless you somehow got Amazon to sign a 500-year, or a 100-year lease, you might sell it at a 4 cap. Heck, you might get a 3, depending on the location. You're not getting a 4 cap for some random deal. You're just not getting that. But what you will get is a 7 or an 8 cap right now. Very reasonably. And obviously you'll have to know your market. Every market's different. Again, like, we have team now in multiple different states. I'm still learning different parts of different markets. If we talk about New Jersey, I could tell you a cap rate in just about any area. But if we just say a blanket statement of like an 8+ cap is probably pretty good in most larger metros. If I'm bringing an investor a 5 cap, he's going to think I'm stupid because they're going to give me the same objections, right? It's like bringing a house buyer, in a neighborhood we all know is worth, $500,000, and you bring it to him at $1 million. Oh, I think this will be great for you. What do you think they're going to say? It's like, we already know that answer. So there's no reason in me not trying to pre-negotiate and knowing what they're going to say to me. So I try to pre-negotiate ahead of time. So that's what the LOI is for, right? Me already making massive levels of assumptions saying, hey, this property, let's take your Zaxby's as an example. It's a triple net single tenant lease, which by the way, I was just sent a portfolio of like 60 triple net deals, and there was a bunch of Zaxby's on there. So if he's interested in buying another one, I might have a perfect property or a guy for you that we could work on together. Just to give you some reference, this Zaxby's, they sell a reasonable 6 to 7, like I'd say 5.5 to 7% cap rate, depending on location, which is typically, by the way, right now for all Fortune 500s / larger credit tenant organizations, they typically will sell between 5s and 7 caps all day long, depending on location. You might get 7.5s, or the higher the cap, you start getting way worse credit tenants, or there's a couple of the things such as low lease term. So they've not that much left on their lease term. Because think about it, if you're a triple net investor, I want the longest lease term possible. I want the largest lease bumps during my lease, and I want the highest credit tenant possible. If you go look right now for Dollar Trees, which has closed, 500 locations this year, and they're like have 2 years left on their lease, you're gonna be like, this is fucking scary. If you go to Walgreens right now and you see a Walgreens single tenant triple net, or like Rite Aids, right, who have closed almost every single one of their locations and they have 3 years left on their lease, this is also really scary right now. If you go to AutoZones, which have closed 700 locations this year, it's freaking scary, right? So you have to have these, there's the dichotomy of saying like, hey, what's a good credit tenant that's doing well, right? I want a good credit tenant that is doing well financially right now in this economy. I want a tenant that has a long-term lease above 10 years, ideally, more than 10 years. Right? The longer the better, right? 15, 20 years the better. Even if, by the way, they have options, right? Even if they have 3, like let's say it's 3 years left on their lease, but they have 5 options at 5 years. It's like, it's technically 28 years. Yep, but you don't know if they're extending, right? They might close. They might close. So you want a long-term lease, and you want as many rent bumps as possible for the highest cap rate you can possibly buy. Okay. I mean, if we just talk foundationally, right? Like,
yeah, I get that. So for this one, they just signed a 10-year. Okay. With 1.5% bumps every year.
Not bad. Okay, great. This type of situation, you could probably, I want you to know, when I send out letters of intent, by no means am I expecting them to get accepted. When they get accepted, I sometimes laugh and I sometimes get scared because I'm like, I offer them too much money, right? Like, I'm like, wow, they accepted it right away. There's maybe something I don't know. But the whole purpose of the LOI is just to get a counter because I want to know what their real number is. Like, are they stuck on this ridiculous number, or are they willing to negotiate to a fair and reasonable price where we can execute? Because the biggest mistake that I see commercial real estate agents make is that they spend way too much time with sellers that are not true sellers. It's like that residential seller who wants, $800,000 or I'm not selling whatsoever. And it's like in a $500,000 market. In that neighborhood, right? And they're like, well, I have the nicest lot, the biggest lot, the nicest house, the nicest this. And some silly agent is like, oh, I'll take your listing no matter what. I just want a listing because I have a sign on the ground. The problem is that too many commercial real estate agents do this with every single lead they get. This is why I submit letters of intent, because it's a sifter, right? I want to find who do I have the highest likelihood chance of working with or transacting with versus who is a pie in the sky, maybe 6 months or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years down the road. Because I want to take all my energy and focus it on this side of the quadrant of people who I can probably transact with versus who I can't. So the point is that most agents will just list this entire pile, right? And like, no matter what side of the coin it's on. I will never do that, right? So I just want to find people who I can transact with, and then I want to find a way to transact with them. right? So with this Zaxby's deal, the way I want you to think about LOIs going forward is I want you to think about it from the lens of like, hey, what would be a price that if you got this property at, this is a steal. This is like, I would raise money to buy this deal tomorrow.
Okay. So so his rents are 188,400 a year. I mean, like 2 million, 2.1 maybe. Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. 2 million would be, don't even sugarcoat it. 2 million. Unbelievable good price.
It would be a freaking good deal.
But I want you to understand, that's what we look for, right?
But knowing that he probably won't sell it at that.
For sure. That's fine.
But then maybe I get him to say that he will sell it at 2.9 or whatever.
Agreed. Right? But the point is that at least we get a gauge, because here's the thing. Let's say we rip an offer for $2 million, okay? And by the way, you can chat to me. I say this to every coaching client. If you find a really good deal, call me, right? Like, and you can use me as a letter of intent. Put my my LLCs on it for the right deals that I give you the thumbs up for. We can always work deals like that. And obviously, I have a guy who's looking for right now for triple net deals. So if this comes out to be pretty good, we can figure it out. Because I'll give you an example. The reason why we do this is because this allows us something called choice. So by ripping an offer at X price, call it $2 million in this case, at a price that basically would be an unbelievably good deal. Okay, this gives us choice, because if he agrees to this price, which by the way has happened several times, okay, let's say he agrees to the $2 million. We have something called choice. We could raise money to buy this deal ourselves. Could be one option. Another option, which by the way, that would be a fantastic deal. I don't see why we don't do that. But another option is we could wholesale it, which means we lock it into a contract, right, for $2 million. And we could find somebody who would probably pay maybe a 7 cap, right? So then all of a sudden we would be doing 400 divided by a 7% cap rate. Yeah, $2.69 million. So we would be flipping this for about a $600,000+ profit. All of a sudden, we're a listing agent who doesn't know doesn't know anything, right? We'll go to this guy and say, I can get you I can get you $3 million. Let's say, let's say $3 million. It'd be like a 6.25 cap, okay? Listing agent who goes, oh, I know better than everyone else. Let me list it for you. I can get you $3 million, no problem. This will be a great listing, whatever, right? Throws it up on CoStar, LoopNet, CREsync, whatever they do. What happens is they'll get, let's just say, and then the seller is like, oh, well, I'm not paying you more than 4% commission. So you just locked up, what you think is $120,000, which I'm not saying it's a bad payday, but what happens is that no one's going to actually buy this deal for $3 million, right? And you maybe get lucky one time, which means they're like, oh my God, this is exactly how it works, and that's not how it works. What we try to do is we lock it for $2 million. We try to pre-negotiate, because you and I both know, like, okay, at a worst case scenario, this deal will probably sell at a 7.5 cap, probably. Like worst case scenario, somewhere in that range. Like, we know that if we locked it up for an unbelievably good deal at $2 million, we know that somebody would probably pay almost no shadow of a doubt 7.5, 8 at most, right? Like, we could probably sell this deal all day long at an absolute most of 8% cap rate. Like, anything above that is just absolute gravy. What happens here, though, is let's just say he counters and goes, listen, I'll never sell this thing for anything less than maybe a 6.5 cap. He goes, like, a 6.5 cap's my top number. So divided by 6.5, which means he wants $2.9 million. So if he counters back at 2.9, what happens here is that now you have choice. Comes back to choice. Where, like, you can say, like, hey, he wants $2.9 million. I think I can now go to the marketplace and try to sell this deal at 2.9 and try to make 2, 3, 4, 5, 6%, whatever he's willing to pay you. Totally fine. However, you can get quick feedback. Let's just say all of a sudden now, because you got a counter at 2.9, you can call up 2 or 3 other local investors who've bought triple net leases in the past. And what happens now is that you can call them and say, hey, I have a deal, $2.9 million, or you can even pitch it at $3 million. It's a 6.25 cap. It's a 6.5 cap, whatever you end up pitching the deal out for, because we can add our spread on top, right? Especially if they say, hey, I'm only going to pay you 2% on $2.9 million. Okay, great. I'm definitely pitching this at $3 million, at least. I'm not going to make 2 points. I'm going to try to make as many as I can. Now, obviously, it just depends on the size of the deal, the quality of the deal, the whole nine. Long story short, though, is that because we negotiated ahead of time, which, by the way, he comes at 2.9, you can be like, okay, great. What I'll do is I'll go back to the buyer who offered you $2 million, and I'll see if I can get him to pay more. I would go back at an 8 cap now, 188,400 divided by 8%. I'd counter the guy at 2.35 million. He wants 2.9. I'm coming back at 2.35, because I know for a fact that we're going to be somewhere in that range with another buyer. And if he agreed to my 8% cap rate, so what I'm just trying to do is pre-negotiate. I'm pre-negotiating on the premise that I know what my investors will pay. Now, again, at the very beginning of your career, this will take some time to get used to. But once you learn this process, there's nothing better.
Well, so, I mean, I've done it. I actively just did that on a residential deal, because I do like reverse wholesaling when the time permits. Because like I had this crappy, super crappy house call me up. He wanted me to sell it. And I was like, no, I was like, I'm not going to do that. He's like, but it needs rehab. I need to sell it. And I said, maybe I'll buy it from you. Let me go look. So I looked at it and was like, okay, I'll buy it from you. Let me just do something. So I call up one of my investors and they say, hey, we'll give you 70 grand. And I said, okay, great. And I call him and I'm like, I'll give you 61. Like, and then I took I'm getting my spread. Of course, I ended up having to pay $4,500 to get rid of an entitlement memorandum or moratorium or whatever the crap.
I get it.
But
So
still,
we do the same
listed that for $1,800. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that for $1,800. I'll do the same shit for, 5-6 grand.
Exactly.
The same process. It's the same thought process, just a
Same
different
exact thought
product.
process. And we just pre-negotiate spread. That's all we do, right? And obviously, it's very similar to what you just did. Exactly. We just do it with a little bit larger deals.
And then I guess my question becomes, so like say I write it up and I'm like, yo, I'm gonna buy it and I'll buy it with an LLC of mine and they say yes. So let's just pretend. Okay, cool. I got 2 million bucks. He says yes. And then after he says yes, I say, oh crap, now I need to find a principal buyer
So
for
in
this.
this, okay, so let me say this. In the event that it's actually a very good deal, you can always call me. Just keep that in mind. That like any deals that you come across that I'm not saying that they just agree to your number, but let's just say you have an inkling that this is a very good deal, similar to this situation. I mean, this would be an unbelievable opportunity. Because now what we do is that I have a list of clientele as an example who buy triple net deals, or give you the guidance to say like, hey, what I would recommend is like, by the way, get excited because like there's an opportunity here to obviously make some serious money, which is we'll underwrite it in depth. We'll actually make sure it's actually worth substantially more than what you paid. I'm not going to lie to you. I've had many times in my career where like I've done this process and like 1% of the time, I'm horribly off. Like 1% of the time, like 99% of the time, I'm pretty damn spot on. 1% of the time, I'm horribly off. And I will sometimes rip an offer and it's like the information provided is completely wrong. Whatever, something's off with it. I messed up, whatever it is. They say yes, I'll take the offer, and then I just say I'm not interested anymore, thanks. But I happen to have a client who might be, and then like nothing ever mattered. Which is why we write up letters of intent to make it very easy because
We're not purchasing sales, but who cares?
Yeah, it has as much value as a napkin. I was looking for a napkin here, but I don't have one. But you get my point. So it's like take this type of situations. It's like when they say yes, get excited because there's going to be a lot of opportunity to make some serious money. There's been many events where like, hey, we take a deal and we just put it into contract. We put down a $5,000, 10, 20, 25K deposit, 50K deposit, whatever it is, and we'll flip the deal for $400,000. There's some seriously amazing spreads that you can make if you find a very good deal. Right, like I know you and I were talking about a multifamily a while ago. Now, obviously, in that instance, there's you have to back out the cost, right? Like obviously, you can get a deal for $1 million that might be worth $5 million, but if it costs you $2.5 million to even get it to the point where you can renovate, then all of a sudden, like that, paying off fines or whatever. I'm making things up now, but you get my point. Where like you still have to do your numbers, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. There's been plenty of times where we think we're going to make some money on a deal, and then all of a sudden we get chopped in half and chopped in half again, and all of a sudden we're only going to make 50 or 100 grand on a deal we thought we were going to make 700K on. Not saying
Well, that's what happened to me. Like my one deal that I did was actually a guy got pissed at me. A commercial broker did actually, because what happened is he was about to list the dang thing, and I found out about it from the owner. Like just ran into the guy like in person, and I was like, yo, what are you doing with that land? He's like, I don't know, I might sell it. I said, okay, cool. So then I went to the city and I got all the information. I created a package and I just started sending it to buyers. And lo and behold, Richmond American comes to me and they're like, yeah, we want it. I was like, great.
love it.
I'm like, I'll be the agent. You pay me. And they're like, okay, cool. And then it was a whole thing. And the guy was so mad at me. He's like, you weren't supposed to send that out to anybody. I was like, I don't owe you anything. What the fuck? Anyway, long story short, there was some like random things that were happening during the inspection period and the definition of lots and all that other stuff. And I ended up throwing in like a whole point on that deal. And so I only walked away with like 300 on it, but it could have been like a $500,000 deal, unfortunately.
I mean, hey, to make 300 is not bad.
No, it wasn't bad, but like, you say, hey, I did this $21 million deal. People think you're like, oh, you're rich now. It's like, well, no. I mean, it was good, but
I get it. So it's just like, those types of situations, which is like, listen, I just keep your investor hat on with every deal. That's what we try to do. Keep your investor hat on, stay creative. There's a way to get through every deal. And, we try to sift through the crap and make sure we focus on what works. And then again, rinse, wash, repeat, man. That's it.
And, so like today it was pretty basic, right? 50 dials, 7 contacts, 2 leads. Nothing crazy because I wasn't even on a dialer, but
Love it.
and I was spending way too much time going into each
Yeah, so that's
individual
why we
deal,
just did the dialer. Because if you try to go into depth on each property, you'll take an hour. You know.
and it hurts your head. Like it's way too much.
And then you start second guessing. Should I call this guy? Wait, should I call this guy? I don't know. Blah blah blah. You know.
So, what would be the fastest way, I guess, to do a proper export list? So, because tomorrow I have time blocked out to be just prospecting, right? So,
Yep.
how should I export it? What leads should I hit? Yeah, like I
Yeah.
haven't
So I
used a
mean,
good
like
list.
based on again, if you want to call multifamily for like your guy, right? So
Well, so he wants to wait till they're cash flowing, so that might be another 2 months because they got rehab projects or something like that. So I guess I could look for him, or I could look for this retail guy. But I got another one who's multifamily because I did half retail, half multifamily today. So I got a lead in multi and a lead in retail that both want to purchase. So I figure I could call on single triple nets or multifamilies, but that guy only wants 70 units or more.
So let me just break it down for you to give you an example, right? It doesn't matter what asset class, this will work for anything, right? So I'm just using Tennessee as an example. You could do any metro you'd like, but I'll just do the other criteria for you, right? So what you'll see here, I'm just going to go from left to right. So you'll choose whatever criteria you want. Obviously, if you want to do multifamily, go to multifamily general. If you go to building and lot, I always try to do like built before 2000 because I don't want anything brand new construction. Next, I don't try to play around with much of the rest of it here. I feel like any of these are just not 100% accurate. The only thing I'll ever play around with sometimes is building area, which is like for warehouses or retail. Going to owner, obviously you want to make sure you click on includes a phone number. If you don't click include phone number, you're going to pull a lot of numbers with properties without it. Obviously, also if you're calling much larger organizations, you want to probably just select person, not company, because if you're calling company, you'll try to call Blackstone, which you probably don't want to do. Because you're not going to transact with them. Go into sales. You can go not within, and you can do like not within the last 10 years. You might even be able to do custom and go like not within the last 20 years. So, if someone's owned it for 20 years, they're probably in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. A little bit on the older side, so you can do not within the last 20 years. Then you go to like tax brackets. So I would always try to bracket off taxes of saying like, okay, let's just say I want to call properties that are a little bit on the larger side. So I would go like, let's just say 25,000 in taxes to 100,000.
Crazy. You're doing the exact thing I've done so far.
Those will be larger properties that have owned it for 20 years that'll have a high likelihood of selling, right? So you have 48 properties in the entire state of Tennessee, which is kind of wild, but that's obviously the only reason why that is because Tennessee has much lower tax brackets.
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's like New Jersey. This would be every property. Which is just really upsetting owning there. So let's just do 15 grand in taxes.
Yeah.
This is insanity.
Well, I know. I went from Washington State, where I used to literally pay out the ass for taxes in Washington, and now I'm over here. I pay like $3,000 a year in taxes or something like that.
It's ridiculous.
It's
all right. So I'm gonna go down to 6,000, but that's fine. So let's just say 6,000. Whatever. Here's 238 properties, right? You break it down, you can start with this list, and this will be a good place to start for like larger multis, right?
So 200. So you would suggest like not having not trying to get it to where it's 1,000 properties all in one poll. Just
I
get
mean,
like
you could, but it's just like I like to find, I'd rather bracket things, right? Like, so let's just say multifamily. I'd rather say like, okay, this list is from I have 548 properties, right? So like what I would do is like my first poll will be like 3K to 10K. That'll be my first poll. The next time I do a poll, it'll be from 6 plus, right? Or 6 to 10, right? Or whatever it is, right? Like it just depends. Like I'm okay with doing like 6 to 15 and say like, okay, whatever this is, I'll pull this list to start, right? And then you can start bracketing outwards over time.
That makes sense.
Right.
Okay.
And, maybe the first pull you do 20 years because like at the let's say the first, call it 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is, you want to pull like the highest likelihood of sale versus just every freaking property. At this point, that's where we're at, for my team.
Like, cause I don't even, it's like, I don't necessarily want to build a massive pipe. I want to get something to build traction, like get something.
Exactly. So I would probably start of like 15, like built before, not sold within like the last 15, maybe 20 years. You could try both. See, like, because like I like tight knit lists. That's fine. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you also have to keep in mind, you're only going to speak to probably 30% of this. So just keep that in mind. You only there's maybe 100 opportunities in here and I'm not like they might be all pretty decent if you get them on the phone.